Peter Foe was born February 17th, 1822, and came to the United States with his brother William in 1848. He got smallpox when he got to New York City, and he was in the hospital. His brother William came to the hospital, and the doctor said he can't live, he's going to die. So William went away with the trunk and all the money they had, and Peter never did find his brother all his life. He looked for him. I have to shut it off. Peter and William came from Ashburton, Devonshire County, England. Peter went to Ohio and worked as a stonemason and married his wife there, a Hewitt. They came to Nebraska in 1856 and bought 800 acres of land south of Elk Creek. Bottom land. Grandpa Peter would walk from Elk Creek to Brownville and take the ferry and go down to St. Joseph, Missouri on the ferry boat on the Missouri River. And then when he would come home, he would carry a 50-pound bag of flour home for his wife to use. Now, Grandpa worked as a stonemason in St. Joe and built several large buildings. One of them was still in use just a short time back as a library. He came back to 60. He left during the Civil War and went down to Missouri, and then came back after the Civil War. Grandpa built a rock house in Tape Rock, which is still standing. Joanne Colina was the last to live in it. And I have the pictures on the paper in which I've passed around. Stone house that Grandpa built east of the Nemaha River, across from Charlie Colina's, was standing until just a few years ago, but after Binders bought it, where they tore it down so they could put in a pivot system. Up to that, it had always stood perfectly. The Nemaha used to get out very badly before it was straightened, and it would come up so fast, and Grandpa Oscar got caught in the high waters one time, and his hired man, Joe Morton, swam out with a rope around his waist and grabbed Grandpa Oscar and they pulled him back. Grandpa was up in a tree. When Grandma Anna Sipple Foe came to the United States, when they got to New York City, on the boat, she looked across and saw the colored black people eating watermelon, but she said, "Oh my goodness, they're meat," and she was scared to death. Grandma couldn't speak a word of English or didn't understand it, and Grandpa didn't understand Czech, so they had quite a... but Grandma knew that Grandpa was well-to-do, so she said she didn't care if she couldn't talk to him. She also found, after they got married, that the flies were so bad, which they don't have flies, or didn't have, and they still don't have the flies that we do in the United States. She couldn't stand the flies coming in because they had no screens on the window, and she said it was something that she had to fight every day. Flies, flies, flies. They don't even have as many bugs like we do in the United States and Czechoslovakia. My mother learned to read and write Czech from her Sippel family, from her grandparents, the Sippels. Sippels and Folds. Grandma had her folks and his folks living with them, and then they had 4 children first, and then, of course, later they had another one, and they had 2 hired men and a hired girl. So they did lots of cooking, too. I would tell you why Mother had such bad eyes. She had measles when she was a girl, and they didn't realize that she shouldn't be in the light, and that affected her eyes, and all her life she had very poor sight until she had her cataracts removed, and then Mother could see real well again with ordinary glasses. She always had pop bottle thick glasses. When Evelyn and I were 7 and 8, or 8 and 9, we went to stay at Grandma's, and Uncle Fred and Aunt Mabel were living in Lincoln, of course, and Floyd was a baby. Aunt Mabel asked us to get dinner while she went somewhere, and she said to put everything in the oven and turn it on. Well, we put it in the oven and turned it on, but we didn't know we were supposed to light the burner. So all morning it stood, and we were having headaches and had to go outside because the gas was about getting us down. Thank goodness we didn't light a match, or the whole thing would have been gone. That's enough. Of course, Fred didn't get any dinner today, and they were scared to death that Floyd was dead, but he was in the front room, and of course we were in the kitchen, and he didn't get too much gas where we were getting headaches. I'm talking about Floyd Krause, not Floyd Bertiska. I also, that same time, I was pushing the baby carriage with Floyd Krause in it, and as we'd go down the street, Evelyn was having fun. She'd come behind me, and she'd had a rolled up paper, and she'd poke me in the back and say, "Ooga, ooga, ooga." And I was so disgusted because I didn't like it. The day the twins were born, Floyd and Lloyd, Aunt Vincy came over with Bob and the Rudy, who was going to be 4 in November, and Bob would have been 4 the following April, went out into the shed and turned out 50 gallons of oil, and boy did they have fun slopping around in it and playing in it, and they looked a terrible mess. Aunt Vincy was so upset she had to go then and clean them both up. I was over to Aunt Vincy's one time, and she and Uncle Joe were going to go down to their farm down by DuBois, and he told Arlen to do something for the car. I don't know what it was now. I don't remember. He was either put gas in or something, and Uncle Joe come out, and he said, "Have you fixed the car?" And he said, "No." So Uncle Joe picked up a stick and hit him on the rear end, and Arlen had matches in his pocket, and they caught on fire, and boy, Uncle Joe had to work hard to get the matches out of his pocket before it burned through. When Vernon was a baby, he couldn't have regular cow's milk. He had to have goat milk because he was such a sick little boy. They came up to Uncle Charlie's, and Uncle Charlie would always say, if you help milk, well, we'll make ice cream, which was very easy for him when they had an ice sauce right by the house. And that day, Aunt Vincy put the milk down in the cooler, in which the water ran through this container from the windmill. It was cold water, and then from there it would go to the barn. And when Aunt Vincy went to get her milk for Vernon, it was gone, and she said, "Oh my, the goat milk isn't here." And Aunt Lucy said, "Well, I didn't know that was goat milk. I put it in the ice cream." I'll tell something on the twins, Floyd and Lloyd. When they were little, Mother went outside calling them, and she called and called and called, and they wouldn't answer her at all. She went down to the barn and looked in, and there they stood with bridles on their heads. And she said, "Boys, why don't you answer me?" They said, after a short time, they said, "Well, horses don't talk." When Mother took the twins to the fair one day, Lorna and Alice came and wanted to take one of the twins, and I don't know which one it was, Lloyd or Floyd. She took them, they went with the girls, and Mother was sitting watching the free acts at the Humboldt Festival. All at once she heard the announcer say, "We've got a lost little boy here." Mother looked up, and it was one of the twins, and she said that was the hardest thing she ever did, to go get her other twin, because she said they all thought, well, she let him get away, but she said she couldn't tell everybody, well, I didn't do this. I was going to mention to Grandpa Oscar, which you younger people, of course, don't know it. When we were staying there, he would sit in his bedroom, and he would write poetry all day long, and he played a little guitar. Well, it was like a ukulele or a little guitar. He played that, and he would sing, and Grandma said, "Oh, that's all he does." But he was in his 80s, so I guess it was his privilege. I'm going to tell a story about the horse story, which I have told before, but I'll tell it again for you that haven't heard it. When Alice and Lorna went out one night a mile from town to dressmaker, for Lorna was having some clothes made, and they come back, and it was raining like the dickens in Tabrock. All four of us were there alone that night because Grandma and Grandpa had gone somewhere, and they came into the football field, and they drove round and round in the rain. The next day, Pattison, the superintendent, came to me and he said, "Do you know anything about that tracks out there?" And I looked out innocently and said, "No, I don't know anything about it. What are you talking about?" "Oh," he said, "somebody drove round and round with a horse and buggy out in the lot." I knew, but I didn't dare tell. That was the same night then when they got home. Lorna said to Alice, "We can't have this horse out in the rain." So she took it up on the front porch, which was cement steps and a cement porch. When Evelyn and I came back, and there was a horse on the porch, we went in and we said, "How are we going to get that horse down? The neighbors will think we're crazy in the morning." And Lorna said, "Well, let's go try doing it now." So we did. But the horse would not go down the steps. So we said, what are we going to do? And we decided that we would go through the house and each of us, one leading and the other three of us putting rugs under the horse's hoofs. And we made it through the front room, dining room, to the kitchen, where the horse stepped on the register, heat register, and it went down in, and the grandma always wanted to know who danced around on that register and caused it to be bent like that. Of course, we didn't know. It wasn't us. We didn't lie. Then when we got to the back door, we couldn't get the horse out. It was too wide for the back screen door. And every time it'd start to go, the whole back porch would go, screen, door, and all. And that was the time it needed to go to the bathroom. So we had to hurry up and get the dustpan and catch the mess. I have to tell something on Bob. When he was little, quite small, why, the girls were putting up their hair, and he was crying because the girls were using his pins, because they called them bobby pins at that time, and he said, "They're using all my pins." I'm going to say that was one thing. Aunt Vincy would always go with Evelyn, Alice, and I to dances. We even went to Sterling, which was a long ways for us, but believe me, we didn't dare leave the hall. In fact, we never did, but we did get to go, and we got to dance, and we thought it was great that she would go with us. I could go on with more things from the past, but maybe it's better left unsaid. And I will end with a little joke that I heard just the other day. Do you know how to make Budweiser? And we said, no, we didn't know. Said, send him to school. I am going to mention now that when Grandpa Full died, Aunt Mabel and she brought Evangeline, came to the funeral, and Evangeline was, I think, 3 or 4, and I was teaching in Woodhill, and I took her home with me, and then she went to school, and the next day she told the kids at school all about different things in California, and they were amused to think a little girl like that could tell them all the things she was telling them. Before Aunt Mabel and Uncle Fred moved to California, where we had a picnic somewhere in the timber. I don't remember where it was, and when we got through eating our lunch, somebody said to Uncle Fred, "Do you want a piece of angel food cake?" He said, "No, I want some of that homemade bread that Ida made, because it's better than any angel food cake." Mother really loved that. I want to mention one thing. The last time Uncle Joe was down before he passed away, he stopped in here and he said some remark, and we thought there was something wrong with him that day. But he visited and visited and visited, and Joanne went to town, and because we didn't have a lot of things ready to give him that evening for supper, and he never did, and he sat here and he kept saying, "I don't understand, Florine. I never thought you would be the type that would work outside and do the things that you do." And I said, "Well, you do what you have to do." And he said, "Yeah, we all do that." And that was the last time I saw him before he passed away.